Good morning, sophomores. Before I introduce our guest speaker, I want, if we can get the slide working, I was going to show you the current global conflict tracker. And if you Google this, it's a very interesting slide that shows you where the current conflicts are in the world. The whole purpose behind this presentation today is to tell you a little bit about these global conflicts because, believe it or not, they really do affect us. These conflicts vary in intensity, from terrorist threats to full-blown war. And I know it's really difficult for us, and especially you as students living in a peaceful democracy, to even begin to understand what people in other parts of the world are currently enduring. But that's the point, to make you aware, because they do affect us all. The story of the Lost Boys, and I know some of you, thank you teachers very much for prepping your students, because most of you do know the compelling story here. The story of the Lost Boys is one of history's lesser known and darker tales from the recent past. There were thousands of children who were orphaned, displaced, or simply cut loose during the second civil war that devastated Sudan, which is where our guest speaker is from. This happened between 1983 and 2005, but the effects are still being felt today. This long, complicated struggle undermined a generation of children, and destroyed families, educational systems, human rights, and even the ability to live. The Lost Boys are so named because refugee groups worked to relocate the Lost Boys into different countries, including the United States. Our guest speaker is one of these former boys who was relocated to the Boston area and who has spent the last 13 years alone, without his family, rebuilding his life. His story is a compelling one, reminding all of us of truly the power of perseverance and also to not take for granted what we are so fortunate to have in our lives, which is living in a peaceful democracy. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Moses Ajou.
Thank you, Mrs. Dearman and Mr. O'Connell for the lovely introduction. Glad to be here today and looking forward to answering your questions later on at the end because those are the most entertaining. Before I begin, as you can see on the board here, these are some of the things that I'm going to go through lightly. But before I do that, let me tell you a little bit about myself. As you have heard from her, my name is Moses Ajou. I arrived here in June of 2001. Went work as a security guard at a place in Everett, Massachusetts, and then in 2002, I went to UNH in Durham, and I was there from 2002 to 2006. I graduated with a bachelor's degree in economic and international relations. I hope most of you will go to Durham or to go to UNH. It's a very great school. After graduating from UNH, I didn't know what to do. And I was also intrigued by some of the, military sort of documentaries that I see and, just my own curiosity. I decided to join the service. I was in the Air Force for 4 years. I was stationed in Dallas, Texas. It's in Central Texas at a town called Abilene, Texas, from 2007 to 2010. While stationed there, I was able to go overseas. So I was in Iraq for 4.5 months, and also Afghanistan for another month and a half. As you have heard from her, that I'm one of the Lost Boys. I left when I was about 6 or 7 years old. I would say 6 or 7 years old because I wasn't sure how old I was. I could be 8, I could have been 7, I could have been 9, or whatever. We don't celebrate birthdays in South Sudan. So usually, and my parents have never been to school, so the calendar that we use to count that this is November 5th, doesn't exist. They use the old lunar calendar. So I wasn't sure exactly how old I was, and so many other Lost Boys that are here. So one thing that you will come to know later on is that most of the Lost Boys that are here has January 1st as their best days. Uh, that's because they don't know when they were born. I left with my uncle. I came from an area that was very close to the north, the source of Darfur. For some of you that know the map of South Sudan, of Sudan is going to come up later on. So that area was attacked by militias on, a regular basis, and that has forced me and some other boys to walk for 3 months to a refugee camp in Ethiopia. So I was in Ethiopia with my uncle. Then my uncle was whisked away and went into the military training camp and joined the Sudan People Liberation Army, which was a rebel movement fighting to liberate the South Sudanese from the oppressive government of Sudan. In '91, we were forced to leave Ethiopia again because there was war in Ethiopia, and the government coming in was very hostile to us. So we have to walk back to South Sudan, where we stayed a little bit, still, getting attacked aerially by the, government of Sudan, sending bombers and also local militias to attack us. So that forced us to walk again all the way to Kenya, where we were trucked to a refugee camp called Kakuma Refugee Camp. I've lived in Kenya for 9 years at that camp, and in 2001, I ended up coming here. As you can see, this is what Sudan looked like, and you can see there is a division of the map there. Sudan was a British colony. It is one of the largest, or it was one of the largest country in Africa. Just to give you the perspective of how big it was Sudan was 1/4 of the U.S. So the whole of northeast, from the east of the whole of the eastern section would actually have been Sudan before it split into two countries. And as you can see, it had River Nile. It ran, just all the way to the north, to the Red Sea. And I came from an area. So if you can see, this is the town. This is closer to my village. This is called Awil. It's now, part of the state, and they call it Northern Barghazal State. And I walk from, here all the way to a refugee camp here, somewhere here in Ethiopia. And then the walk was all the way back through here, and then to a town here in northern Kenya. So that's how long the walk took. I didn't know how long it was, but our expert estimate the walk to be over 2,000 miles. Sudan, has two wars. The first civil war started in 1955. And, that is one of the wars that actually, started because when the British were, in Sudan, the southern section was only led by the chiefs, local chiefs. They have no formal government training, but the northern section has a central government. But when the British left, they thought that Southerners were not ready to lead themselves, and they left the British government in power, or the Northern Sudan government in power. That did not sit well with the Southerners, and that's the cause of the first war. It was the need for self-determination, distribution of resources, and many others. I'm going to come to that later on. Sudan itself is, is one of those countries that was blessed with a lot of national resources. It has, oil, reserves. It has vast agricultural land. It, had animals, other minerals that has never been exploited except the oil reserve. That's the only thing that is being exploited now, and is part of the thing that contribute to the conflict. The food staple usually, grains such as sorghum, maize, which is corn, groundnut and bananas. So as I mentioned earlier, the first war started in 1955, and it ended, with an agreement in Addis Ababa that gave the Southerners the right to self-determination, their own government. Uh, the thing that has been going on is that all the wars are happening in the South. The government in the North usually would have, all the town in the South occupied by the, some Southerners that are supporting the government and also some people from the North. And that has been the case. So this war ended with this agreement that South Sudan would have its own autonomy. Some rebels of the first movement did not agree with that, and they still had this. And this is Anyanya, I think, Anyanya movement. It's a local snake that is hard to catch or it run around, so it's a local language. So the group that did not agree with the agreement that was signed here had this war. So from 55 to this period, there was still war. There was still group in the bush trying to overthrow the government. But the major war broke out in 1983, and it was led by the Sudan People Liberation Army, which was a South Sudanese political entity group or the military wing that wanted to liberate all the oppressed South Sudanese, not only the South Sudanese, but other marginalized Sudanese, people in Darfur, in East Sudan, South Kordofan, and all other areas. So as I mentioned earlier, the causes of the conflict ranges from political, disenchantment, Southerners not being able to lead, to cultural differences. One of the most striking things that drove Southern Sudanese, to fight for independence is the fact that the people of North, call themselves Muslim. They call themselves Arabs. They're not Arab like you would see in Egypt or in Saudi Arabia. They are mixed, but of course their cultural, their cultural base is on Sharia law or Islam. And for the country to be one, they wanted that Sharia law should be the governing law for the whole country. Southerners, on the other hand, they have different, they have Christians, they have traditional, believers that don't believe in Islam or Christianity. They believe in their traditional gods. And there are a few Muslims. And Southerners do not like to be forced to, adhere to a law that they don't know. So it was one of the issues that was a driving factor in the war. Plus the fact that also the people of North thought that anybody that is not a Muslim or who's, or who did not come from a family or a generation of Muslim will not be the president of Sudan. So South Sudanese will not see themselves as being capable or being a leader. The post that would be, or that was given to a South Sudanese even recently, before the independence of South Sudan, was the second vice president. So, imagine like having maybe President Obama, Joe Biden as the first vice president and the second vice president as somebody else. And usually the second vice president is just like a puppet. You have no powers. You don't have anything. So that did not sit well with the South Sudanese, and it drove them more to want to have self-determination. Because the narrative has been South Sudanese cannot govern themselves. They are disorganized. They're not well educated. They don't know how to govern. So the war itself has, the one that started in 1983, led to the fleeing of all the Lost Boys, displacement of a lot of South Sudanese, both internally and externally. Over 2.5 million people perished in that war from the course of 83 to 2005. And, and as a result, the whole country has not seen any, or the part of the South during the war has not seen a single development. Medical facilities were non-existent. Schools were not built, roads were not there. And it also led to South Sudan becoming an independent in July of 2011. So South Sudan is now one of the newest nations in the world, because South Sudanese, after uh, having fought for for more than 20 years, in 2005, the U.S. Congress here passed a law called Sudan Peace Act, and in that they forced the warring parties, which is the Sudan People Liberation Army, fighting for the freedom of Southerners, and the National Islamic Front to sign a peace agreement where South Sudanese were given 6 years to self-govern themselves, and then after 6 years, they can vote wherever they are to determine whether Sudan remain as a united country or as a divided country. And that has led to 98.9% of South Sudanese voted for independence. We actually voted here in Massachusetts. We voted in Massachusetts. People from South Sudanese in New Hampshire, Manchester, and other areas came to, a center we used to have in Arlington that was one of the polling stations, and everybody voted for, separation of South Sudan. As you have seen, when we were uprooted from our homes, our livelihood was based on what UN agencies can provide. If there are no UN agencies, all we have to do is just try to live by whatever nature provides nearby. Remember the time we left Ethiopia, where there was no UNHCR and nobody else for a couple of months. It was tough, trying to get something to eat. And all we have to do is try to, for myself, it is to get wild berries wherever they are and try to eat that. And also the local people were sort of generous in some way, even though they become hostile afterward. But initially, they were helping most of us. The food in the refugee camp itself, especially in Kenya, was, rationed in some way. If you have 1 meal a day, that's enough to sustain you. It wasn't enough to feed everybody. And the reason would, for us, then maybe we thought nobody cares about us. But as time goes, I think we now understand that the reason was usually anything that the UN provides is donated by the countries. And if there is any donation coming in, they would have to use whatever is available to extend people's life, but not, really make you happy, but at least keep you alive. Also in the camp, the UN was in a bind because they have schools in the camp. The schools were way better than the school we have in Ethiopia. They were way better than the school in South Sudan itself, but not better than the Kenyan school themselves. But sometimes they have to decide whether they, have to keep, us in school or feed us. And sometimes, the latter would win most of the time, give us food, and when there is extra money, that's when they would reopen the schools again. Also in the camp, people have stayed there for long, and one of the things that started, especially in 98 to 99, was the fighting with the South Sudanese themselves. Even the Dinkas that speak the same language, for some reason they brought in their traditional, ways of doing things, and local disputes were also a problem. And that in the camp did not make it, well for people that are not, part of those conflicts. Movement between the camps was also, or between the camps, or when you want to go outside the camp, was difficult. The Kenyan government restricted all, the refugees into Kakuma refugee camp. I've never left Kakuma refugee camp until, I was about to come here. That's the only time I leave. So when you want to go someplace, you have to, fill out some paperwork, something. Even going back to South Sudan is difficult. Sometimes some people have to, sneak out at night if they are tired of life and want to go back to South Sudan. So that made it difficult there. But the only thing that kept most of us in the camp, or myself, was the hope of getting a better education. I mean, educational opportunities in the camp were inadequate in some sense, but they were way better than what some South Sudanese that are locally, displaced, have. So as you can see, this is one of the photos that was taken of all the South Sudanese young men at the initial day of arriving, in Peñado. And I think this one was taken when we were coming to, Kenya. As you can see, everybody's working barefoot. You have no shoes, and whatever we were carrying on our back was the, all that you have. Maybe a blanket, one chain of clothes. That's all you have. As you can see, this is the town called Bor. Majority of the Lost Boys here, come from this area. Their walk to this refugee camp in Ethiopia initially was not long. It was about 2 weeks to a month. But for me, it was all the way out here, and I have to walk. And then we all took the journey back to Kakuma refugee camp, where we have lived for 9 years. One other thing that I want to say is when we were in Ethiopia, we were put in 12 groups. One group, consists of up to 1,200 children or boys, and there would be only, about, you would say about, 100 or less, teachers or caretakers for those boys. So during the day, they are the teachers, and then maybe at night, when everybody's sleeping, they're the caretakers. One thing that has worked out for the best is that the buddy system, had made it easier for all of us. In the groups, there was, smaller group, even smaller group within the group. And we have, we ended up developing bonds like friends. I have friends now that I have known since 1987. They're still here. They are in Massachusetts with me. They came, we came together. So they became like brothers to me. This is what has become of Sudan as we speak. This is South Sudan, and this is the flag of South Sudan, and this is what has remained of Sudan. Right now, South Sudan has become an independent country. It is ruled by one party called the Sudan People Liberation Army. This, sometimes they call it the Sudan People Liberation Movement, to make it a political party. But one of the founders is now the president. He has been president since 2005. In 2005, after the after the peace agreement was signed, one of the founders, his name was Dr. John Garang. He was the founding, father of the movement. He's a graduate of, Highway State University, and he was a colonel in the Sudan Army. Died 11 days after the peace agreement was signed. He died in a helicopter crash, and his vice president became the president. Now, when the vice president became the president, he appointed a governor of this state called the Unity State. This governor was once a president. He was one commanders of the SPLA. But in 1991, he defected from the SPLA and he joined the Northern Sudan, the NIR regime, this guy here. So when peace agreement was signed, he switched side again and he rejoined the SPLA. So when he was appointed the vice president, he went ahead and was campaigning to unseat this president, who was the founding fathers of this movement, fighting to liberate the South Sudanese. So in July of 2013, the president sacked the whole cabinet. He fired the whole cabinet, so all the ministers, including the vice president. So that did not sit well. So the vice president, organized, and the thing is that within, the presidential palace, they have what they call the presidential guard. it's like battalions of army, about 3,000 or so. It's made up of different ethnic groups. This guy came from an ethnic group called Nuer, and the president came from an ethnic group called uh, Dinka. So the presidential guard fight, among themselves near the, presidential compound in the capital city here, Juba. And this happened in December of 2000, December 15 to December 17. So over 500 people died in 3 days. And as a result, the war has spread to some of these areas, all of these areas, as you can see. And this is where a lot of destruction has taken place, especially this town here, and also up here. All of these areas, villages were burned to the ground. Residents in these areas either are in the displaced camp within, some of the towns here, or they have fled to Ethiopia, for protection. Others have fled even to Kenya. So this is the current situation that is going on. The war itself has killed more people in a few months compared to the war that was happening between the North and the South. This war has taken a tribal dimension. It was a political disagreement, but it has actually now pushed the country backward. The country was moving forward to, construct road, make development. It's not helping. It is also complicating things because this area is called Abyei, is inhabited by the Dinkas, but is claimed by, by Sudan. It had a lot of oil deposits. Some of it is now being mined, and some of it is not. So that is making it, making a complication. There is also a dispute here in some of the areas. They now call it 14 Mile. Is a very fertile agricultural areas. There is a potential of mineral deposits. Is also disputed. The border between Sudan and South Sudan is not divided. There is no clear border as to where. So there are UN peacekeeping forces all over South Sudan trying to maintain stability. So that's the state of current situation in South Sudan. In some way, people were happy that they were separated from the country that was oppressing them. But I think that hope is now dashed by the current conflict that is going on between South Sudanese themselves. Things have improved in some way. You can now communicate, there are cell phone towers where people can, you could call somebody and talk on a cell phone in South Sudan, which wasn't, in existence before. So things are improving a little bit, but the war has also, caused the little improvement that was gained to be pushed back. Again, these are recent photos of people, being forced to cross River Nile on canoes and just whatever they can. And this is one of the displacement camps in South Sudan. Now, after, when we started arriving here, we came from a refugee camp. While we were at the refugee camp, getting ready to come here, one of the Massachusetts residents, his name is Sasha Shanov, was actually sent by International Organization for Migration to give us orientation on U.S. culture, or they call it cultural orientation. So while he was there, he learned that some of us would be coming here to Massachusetts. So what he ended up doing is give whoever is coming, to Massachusetts, his dad's and mom's, phone number. So, we were arriving here every week, every other week. At least there, 4 or 5 or 6. And the first person they will call, would be, such as parent. So his dad, David Channel, organized volunteers to, that could pick us up and bring us to someplace. And it led to, the formation of the South Sudanese Enrichment for Families. It is an organization that I work for now as an assistant director and also as a program director for this Saturday Bridges program. The mission of the organization initially was to help the South Sudanese coming here have access to all the opportunities that could be provided here in the U.S. And, in terms of education, social support and being, a good, people in the society. To be productive, you have to get used, or you have to know what the opportunities are there. As time goes, initially when I went to UNH for 4 years, I was getting assistance from this organization that I now work for, and so are many other Lost Boys. I have, they would give me up to $500 a semester for books. I was taking economics, and books are very expensive. So that, had helped me a lot, and it also helped some other boys. But now we have also shifted the program a little bit, and our main focus is on this Saturday Bridges program. And this is a program where we bring all the families to a school in Malden. A student of your, sophomore, high school student, grade 8 student, retired teachers of different life, they all come there. And we also have, so our students' families come there. We divide the children into different age groups from 0 to 4, or 0 to 2, 3 to 4, 5 to 6, 7 to 8, and all up. And they have group leaders, and we assign volunteers to them that help tutor them and also help them with whatever need they may have for their homeworks and other stuff. The reason we had the program initially was because the women or the wives of the Lost Boys do not know how to read and write. As I have mentioned earlier, there was no formal education system in South Sudan. The little thing that was there did not give the girls the chance to go to school, even before the war. After the war, the girls did not have any chance of going to school. They could not even read and write the Dinka language that they speak. So coming here to the U.S., I think, was really tough for them. If they want to make, to be better for themselves, they need to know how to read and write. If they need to drive, they have to pass the permit test and all of that stuff. So we started ESL program for them, and it worked out best because their children are getting, babysit, or they're getting tutored while they have the time to learn, which is not something that they would have had access to have we not had the Saturday Bridges program. Because the local community had those ESL programs that they offer, but not the childcare. And the women found it very hard to leave their children with anybody because the husbands are working sort of odd jobs. If working at a grocery store or, at a restaurant or hotel or something, it's not easy to have a fixed schedule where your wife could go to class while you babysit. So the Saturday Bridges program helped that way. The other thing that we have is the cultural preservation program, and this entails some of the photos some of the paintings that were painted by the Lost Boys in the refugee camp. Some of it document the cultural, way of life, and also the life or whatever problem that Lost Boys went through. So we have some paintings at the community center, and also we have the summer camp program where we send some of the kids to Camp Calumet here in New Hampshire. Sometimes we collaborate with them, and they would give us about 15 slots where we send some of the kids. We started 3 years ago, and for most of the kids, it was their first time, at a Silverway camp, which was really great. So this is, how anybody can help SEF. And to learn more about what we do, this is our website, and we are located, in Malden, Massachusetts. And before I take your questions, I would, I want to teach you Dinka a little bit. Pew mean water, and then Thon Marial is this black and white bull. As you can see, the horns are shaped in this way. There's a trick to making the horns shape themselves this way. It's like when this bull was young and his horn were growing, there were some notches that were cut. If the horn were growing like that, the knife would be cut this way, and then another one would be cut this way. So the horns sort of grow like that. Cows in Dinka culture are, better priced. You know, I could give my mom $10,000, and it's not, she's going to say, well, you gave me money. It's just money. But if I give her, 100 cows, it would be the story of her life, because it would be more than the $10,000 that she get. So, in the Dinka culture, cattle are the, form of wealth. Your, status is, determined by how many cattle you have. You can marry as many wives as you want, with the number of cattle that you have. And then Deng, of course, mean rain. And then this is Wegachale, mean thank you. And then with that, I'll take your questions.
So a couple of things that I've taken away from this is, for me, I probably told some of my classes this, that I spent a couple of years trying to find one of the Lost Boys to come speak to us, and it was really difficult. You're so busy working and doing great things that it took a while. And one of the things that happened was 3 weeks ago when I was in the car on the way to school, I was listening to National Public Radio, and Moses was being interviewed. And maybe you all are not aware, there's a new movie that was just released starring Reese Witherspoon. The movie is called The Good Lie. It is the story of the Lost Boys' journey, so maybe you'll have a chance to check that out. We are going to take questions, and we can do this one of two ways. I know some of you have prepared questions, so I'd like to be the roving reporter and come down into the audience. So if you have a question that you would like to ask Moses, raise your hand, and I will come ask you a question. And the other thing is, I know I have a set of prepared questions from students, so if the audience is not participating, then I have a list of questions as well. All right, who has a question?
How do you feel about our government?
The United States government is also my government right now. So for the past few years, I think, I feel disgusted a little bit because there was a lot of nothing going on and just bickering and fighting. So, the feeling was things are not great. But, with the election, I think, it determined what we can do, and it didn't work out, I guess, the way many of us expect. But, I think the government here is different than many other governments. Any political difference is settled through elections, through ballot, but not through fights. Usually differences don't, ended up taking people's life, and that's a great thing.
What's your favorite season?
What is my favorite season? I would say summer, of course. I don't like it when it's hot and humid, but when it's hot and dry, I like that. And I think now I'm beginning to like spring. It feels a little bit, warmer compared to winter. So, spring and maybe fall, I think I like, the best. But I like the summer the best. So, yeah.
How do you like the U.S. so far?
How do I like the U.S.? Like I have mentioned earlier, the U.S. is like my adopted home, and I call it my home now. So, I like it like I would like the home.
Moses has not been back home since he left, so that's something else to consider. He has not seen his family. He still has family back in the Sudan, so think about that. And you never really know what is going to impact your life, right? And so think about the struggles that you would have in relocating to a brand new country. And in fact, one of the questions that came up often was, what was the biggest challenge for you? Could you narrow it down to one thing?
I would say the biggest challenge initially was the weather. It's just, I came here in June, of course, but June usually people sweat. But when I came here in June, I was freezing. I don't know why. Some people were wearing just t-shirt, tank top, but I just I had long sleeve on and a sweater, but I was still freezing. So I think the weather is one of the things that would be. I don't know if I would ever be used to it. The other thing is also culture. There is not a set of culture that you could identify with here in the U.S. because you go to the Northeast, it's a different culture. I have lived in Texas, it's totally different way, and that itself I think is one of the best thing ever, and also is one of the most challenging thing because I learn everything every day I go.
Do you think you would ever visit Sudan again?
Yes, I will. I can go anytime I want it. The reason I wouldn't, go for now is my wife and I just had a baby boy, and he's about 4 months, so I have to. So I think that's going to keep me here for a little while, but I would want to go back. And my mom keep asking me that question when I speak to her on the phone. When are you coming? That's all she has. So I'll go some days. I'm not sure exactly when, but I will go.
What's your favorite American food?
The favorite of them all is steak and cheese.
Steak and cheese.
And my first, the first food that I have learned to eat when I first arrived here, uh, we have had chicken, of course, but I got tired of it after a while. So what we have had was pizza, and I still like pizza up to date. So pepperoni cheese, all of that. So
What was the first? Oh, geez. What was the first thing you thought when you came to America?
uh, you know, there were so many things that were going on. First, I was excited that I came into the U.S. and was also worried, like, okay, how am I going to, exist here? Everything is new, and I have to learn everything. So initially, I was just sort of worried about what my life would be like. But as time goes, starting with having my first job ever, getting my first paycheck, going to school, it became easier. And I thought maybe coming to the U.S. here was something worthwhile and an opportunity that many others did not have, and I like that.
What do you miss most from Sudan?
Uh, I missed the growing up as a child with my mother and my father and sibling beside me. Uh, while first when we got to Ethiopia, I can't remember how many nights I just kept crying, and it wasn't only me. Many other boys were like that. There were occasions when the first time we were grouped together, and there were no house or huts to sleep on. We was just you had, if you have a blanket, you just put it on the floor and that's where you sleep. And there was a whole fort that was cut, for the group to stay in. So every night, everybody would just lay down in a line, and that's where we sleep. If one person dream and start crying, the whole group cries. Imagine about 3,000 boys, within the vicinity of, 100 yards, all crying at once. So it had happened like that, and that I think, is something like my parent and other people have never experienced, and that's what I miss the most. Is just growing up and being a kid, with my family close by.
What has surprised you most about coming to America?
First, when we came here, I think it was the fact that people have a misconception that when you go to America, that things would be a lot more rosier than you would have at a different place. So usually, especially people who are refugee came had a conception that since most of the food that people eat, come from the USAID or USA, people think you come to the US, the government will set up an account for you, give you all this, all that, and so for most of us that came here, I think we had that conception, but it turned out for the good that, if you work if you work your tail off, you struggle, you will get someplace, which is the most, important thing and the greatest thing ever here in this country. So I think there was, so many things, but that was one of the things that people thought, they were going to get into.
What inspired you to keep walking during your journey?
One of the things that, kept me, going was that there were some children or some boys in a worse position than I am. I would say in a worse position than I am because they were either sicker than I am or a little bit younger than I am. And of course, we have no choice. You get left behind, where are you going to stay? Uh, you know, Either you're going to be eaten by the animal or die of thirst or, get killed by a stranger. So the fear of that itself, first kept us going. And at the same time, the few teachers or adults that we have, keep, saying, there is a better place ahead. When we go there, there's going to be plenty of this, plenty of that, plenty of that. As kid, I think that's, it kept us going. And just, being with each other and supporting each other was also a factor that kept us going.
What was your first reaction when you saw your name on the list?
It was very exciting. It was very exciting for the fact that I was one of those that was able to finish high school in the camp, a few of us that were there. And after high school, I think there was no any other way out. Either I would have, gone back to South Sudan. I was old enough then, I was about 20, so I could have, re-enlist in the rebel movement fighting the government. But when I, learned that I was coming here, I think it gave me hope that my future would be brighter and that I would be able to accomplish some of the things that I wanted to do. So it was really very exciting. And
did you stay in contact with the people you came here with?
yes, currently, I still come into contact with people that I have lived with since 1987. The one that are not here in the state, I'm in contact with them either on Facebook or on the phone. Sometimes we talk. But there are about 36 to 37 lost boys and lost girls all over the U.S., except Alaska and Hawaii, maybe. But there were, some have now moved to Maine, but nobody was settled in Maine and New Hampshire. But here in Manchester, there are some lost boys there with their families, and all over the U.S. Wherever you go, there are some, and I pretty much know a lot of them. Some of them I've known since 1987. Some of them I knew here. Others I met in the camp. Became classmates, or we met in other settings. And I'm in contact with most of them.
What were your hopes and dreams when you first came to America?
My first hope was to go to school, which I did. Went to UNH. My other aspiration was to, and that was the reason that actually drove me to go to join the Air Force, was to be a fighter pilot. I was in service, of course. It was a great experience, and it was something that was doing, and I, enjoyed doing it. Came back, and in May of this year, I actually had my MBA in accounting from Endicott College. So, my hope of getting education is now, almost done, or it is done in some way. And, I'm hopeful that, I will achieve all the dreams that I have set for myself in this country. Because there are opportunities, even though they're dwindling, they are there. And if I try hard to pursue them, I'll get them.
When you learned that you were coming to the U.S., what was your biggest worry?
My biggest worry initially was, who am I going to stay with? Because the first group that left were actually put in the foster families. And as, for us back in the camp, we have never lived with, other people. Language was an issue. Culture was an issue. So the first thing that came to mind was, who am I going to live with, or where am I going to stay? That was the first thing. The second thing was, if I go to the U.S., how am I going to come back? You know, I had the vision that maybe after completing high school back in the refugee camp that I will go back to, to my village. And then it came up that, I'm coming to the US. So I was like, okay, is this going to materialize anymore? But now I think it's up to me. If I wanted to go today, I could go. I have the passport, I have all of that, so.
During your walk from Sudan to the refugee camp, what was your biggest fear?
The biggest fear, of course, was, as kids, most of the stories, night stories that are told are about lions. Either lions being outfoxed by a fox or lion attacking, somebody and the hero came and saved that person. So I've never seen a lion before, before I left home. I've never even heard it roar before, although we live closer by to where they are, because maybe when they do at night, I'm asleep. So when we were walking, we would hear them roar. And a dog would be like, oh, this lion is very close. I don't know how they determined that, but I would hear the noise. So whether I'm walking during the day or at night, it would be something that was sticking, in my mind. It was one of the worries. The other worry is that the walk tend to be very long and very tiring, very exhausting in some way. And I just, I didn't want to, fall down, or I didn't want to be lost someplace. I was lucky enough that I have my uncle with me. But I didn't want to get to the point where he has to carry me, because he was also taking care of my other cousins that unfortunately died in '91. But during the walk, he actually caught tuberculosis. So he was coughing, and my uncle was taking care of him. I was healthy, of course. I was closer by, but I didn't want to be in the situation where my other cousin is. So those were some of the worries that kept popping up in my head. And the other worry is, would I ever go back and see my family? Those were some of the things that kept reoccurring as I was walking.
How did you feel when you got on the plane to come to America?
I sort of felt, the feeling is, I can't describe exactly how I felt, but there was a sort of excitement in me, just like many others. The hope was that coming to the U.S., would change things for the better, which it has, and there was that excitement in you where you sort of feel like very excited about something, you like it more, but you're also afraid. So there was that combination of it. Yes.
What did people do for fun in South Sudan?
So many things. First, as boys in the village, we play hide and seek. We play some local games, and of course, we have our own way of field hockey. It's different than the field hockey that you play here. So in the dry season, that's what we do. Sometimes we just go play hide and seek, go someplace. As kid, when I was in South Sudan, I was never bored. I have something that I'm doing all the time and playing as a child. But in towns, of course, they have, for most of the kids, it's just playing soccer and playing other, or just playing hide and seek. That's what people do, and people try to make a light out of something that is very dire. Even at the displaced camp now, if you go there, you will see kids still playing soccer. No matter what, even, when they get quiet down, they're not going to sit there and say, hey, this is going to happen next. They just go about their way and play.
How did you make friends?
Usually it's just like, interacting with people. There are other people that, become unenforced friends because, we were put together and we were going to live side by side no matter what, especially in the refugee camps and also when we were in Ethiopia. So we became friends that way, and we also had, friends that, I had so many friends now, both South Sudanese, with American-born South Sudanese and other people that I have met while in service. I became very close friends with them. So usually just, interacting with people and, being open and, talking to people, sometimes saying hi and person saying hi back to you and smile and you go that way. So I think, making friends is a great thing and it's good to have friends.
How did you meet your wife?
I met my wife here. She's South Sudanese. She's also a Dinka, but we went different way. Her and her family, they went to northern Sudan, Khartoum, and then they went to Cairo, Egypt, and then from there they came here to the U.S. So we met here. She lived in Lynn with her family, and I met her that way, and and that's how we met. So.
Have you developed any new habits in America you didn't have in Sudan?
I don't know.
That you want to admit to.
Now I like I have the habit of, let's say, watching football or being on TV the most. I used to like soccer. Soccer was my favorite. And then became basketball. But now, it became more of, football. I think I like football the most. I don't know why. And this is one of the things that we always fight over, my wife and I. Every Sunday I had the remote and she wanted that, and I would just say, give me time. So I guess you could call that a habit, but that's what I have developed now.
How many languages do you speak?
I speak Dinka, of course, which is my native language. Speak English, the best I can. I also understand Arabic in some way, and then some other local languages like the Nuer. When we were in Kenya, I learned Kiswahili, so I can also understand Kiswahili. I can write it a little bit. I can understand some of it. So I think those are some of the languages that I would say I can understand or can speak.
Do you think you'll bring your kid to Sudan?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Do you think you'll bring your kid to Sudan? Sorry.
Oh, I could take my family. Yeah, my wife actually, before we got married, she went back to South Sudan with her mom and her brothers. So she went and saw her dad that she hasn't seen for, I think, about 14 years. Yeah, someday, we're gonna go back. My wife and I and my son, we're gonna go back because I think one thing that my mom would want the most is to see her grandson. She has other grandchildren, but I'm the oldest, of the boys. So, and in African culture or in Dinka culture, the older boys usually the family, sort of it take a role of, to be a family head or something. So for her to see my son, I think would be something that she would want the most, and I'll try the best I can to go back there.
What was your first impression on driving a car, and was it hard for you to drive one?
It was actually very funny, and it was one of the most exciting things. Remember I told you earlier that I started working as a security guard. Where I work is actually about 20-minute walk away from where I live. But if I have to take the T, it will take me an hour or two. So, I started working in September, and I was biking there. But in the winter, it became very tough. So I, went and got my permit and learned how to drive. It was really very exciting. It was very exciting. And my first car, of course, was Chevy aluminum. It gave me troubles afterward, but it was, it was very exciting driving a car.
Do you have or want any pets?
No, I don't.
What is your favorite music?
And then my favorites of them all was R&B. I like R&B, light rock. And then when I went to Texas, I I went to, certain clubs and it was all country music that they were playing. So I, developed the like of that. But, my favorite of them all is, R&B.
Can you comment on the title of the movie, The Good Lie?
The movie is called The Good Lie, and I guess the title came from, there was a book, I think, written about somebody that, lied during the slavery period, that he was keeping a slave. I can't remember the title of that book. But one of the slaves ran away and he was hiding him, and then some, people came looking for the runaway slave. And he told them that he didn't have the slave, but he had him. So he lied that he didn't have him, but it was a good lie in the sense that he was lying to protect the freedom and the livelihood of that person. So the movie, in the end of it, it had a story where one of the actors, who lost his brother, his older brother actually, gave himself up when they were attacked and ran away to militias, so his younger sibling could, escape. So some way he made it back to Kakumu refugee camp, and one of the actors that came here learned about that his brother came. So he went back, and of course there were siblings, the lookalike. He gave him, his traveling document so that his brother could be him and come back to the U.S. and he would remain in the camp. I think that's the end of the movie. But usually the movie, the first section of the movie, pretty much depict, the life that the Lost Boys and many other South Sudanese went through. And the second part of it is, based here in the U.S. It's very funny, and that's where Reese Witherspoon come in and many others. And you should check it out sometime. Somebody was telling me that they may have it on Netflix or something. I'm not sure exactly if they have it there or not. But the movie is a fictional story or depiction of what the Lost Boys went through during the war, life at refugee camps and all of that. It's a great movie.
I think we have time for just maybe one or two more questions.
Do you enjoy Thanksgiving?
Yes, I do. I do. My first Thanksgiving actually was in Arlington. So I didn't know what it was initially, but now that I have read into it more, it's still called as Thanksgiving, and it had some horror stories in it in some way, but it's a Thanksgiving, so it's a good time to be together with friends and just relax.
What's your kid's name?
I named him. He had the same name as my last name, Ajou. So that's like a family name, and I gave him that.
And could we have a final round of applause for Mr. Moses Ajou?
Thank you. Thank you. And before I let you go, I usually like to tell some of my audience that as a child, it's good to cherish what you have. And what you have, by that I meant the parent or the guardian that are there with you, some of the friends and some of the teachers. I miss that a lot, and I would not get it back. And it is something that is there for you. And the good thing is to what you need to do always is just whatever you're going through, know that you have people there that are there to support you, even though you don't agree with what they tell you, which I was doing to some of my, guidance when I became an adolescent in the refugee camp. That in the end, they know more than you do, and they mean good for your future. So, at your free time or when you feel like, just say thank you to your mom or dad, or also some of your teachers or guidance, or, counselor in some sense. Thank you.